March 17, 1943. 400 miles west of Ireland, North Atlantic. Kapitänleutnant Werner Hartmann stood in the cramped control room of U-boat 371, studying the hydrophone operator's pale face. Above them, somewhere in the darkness of the storm-tossed surface, an American destroyer was hunting. "Range?" Hartmann whispered, though sound traveled poorly through the steel hull. 1,200 meters, Herr Kalu. Closing slowly, very slowly. Hartmann allowed himself a thin smile. This was the dance he'd performed 17 times before. 17 Allied convoys, 17 successful attacks, 0 losses. The Americans were predictable. They would pass overhead, drop their depth charges in a random pattern, hoping for luck, and he would slip away in the confusion. The hydrophone operator's hand suddenly shot up. "New sound, Herr Kalu. Multiple splashes, but—" His face contorted in confusion. "They're not exploding." Hartmann's smile faded. Depth charges that didn't explode? A malfunction? An opportunity to— The world became violence. Not the rolling thunder of conventional depth charges detonating at preset depths, giving a submarine time to maneuver. These were different. Sharp, precise detonations directly above the U-boat's hull. The lights in the control room shattered. Men screamed as valve wheels spun loose, spraying scalding steam. The pressure hull groaned like a dying whale. "Blow all tanks! Emergency surface! Surface now!" As U-371 clawed toward the surface, her hull ruptured in 3 places. Hartmann's last thought before the Atlantic claimed him was simple and terrible. The Americans have changed the rules. What Kapitänleutnant Werner Hartmann encountered in his final moments was the Hedgehog, a weapon so revolutionary that it would transform the Battle of the Atlantic from a contest between equals into a systematic extermination. Within 18 months, the weapon he'd never heard of would help destroy 271 U-boats and break the back of the Kriegsmarine submarine force. The German U-boat commanders mocked American anti-submarine warfare as primitive and ineffective. By the time they understood their mistake, the Atlantic had become their graveyard, and the Hedgehog had become the gravedigger. The Wolfpack Supremacy. September 1939. U-boat headquarters, Wilhelmshaven, Germany. Admiral Karl Dönitz stood before a map of the Atlantic, his face illuminated by the confidence of a man who held the key to Germany's victory. "Gentlemen, we will strangle Britain. Not with battleships or bombers, but with our U-boats. We will sink their merchants faster than they can build them. We will starve them into submission." Dönitz's confidence wasn't arrogance, it was mathematics. His U-boats, operating in coordinated wolf packs, had developed tactics that seemed unstoppable. Surface at night, invisible to radar. Attack from multiple directions simultaneously. Dive before dawn, disappear into the ocean's vastness. The early statistics supported his optimism. In 1940, U-boats sank 2.8 million tons of Allied shipping. In 1931, 3.3 million tons. In 1942, the catastrophic year the Allies would call the Second Happy Time, U-boats would sink 6.2 million tons, over 1,600 ships sent to the bottom. Korvettenkapitän Otto Kretschmer, who would become the highest-scoring U-boat ace with 44 ships sunk, developed the doctrine that made these numbers possible. Get in close. 1 torpedo, 1 ship. Surface at night, invisible and invulnerable. British and American destroyers hunted U-boats using depth charges, 300-pound drums of high explosive that would roll off the stern or be thrown from side launchers. The tactic was crude. Sail over where you think the submarine is, drop charges set to explode at estimated depth, hope for luck. The problem was fundamental. Depth charges could only be deployed when the attacking ship passed directly over the submarine's position. This meant losing sonar contact at the critical moment. The submarine commander, hearing the destroyer overhead, had 30 to 60 seconds to maneuver before the charges detonated. In that time, a skilled commander could move his boat 100 yards in any direction. The result was less than 5% of depth charge attacks resulted in kills. U-boat commanders learned to survive the bombardment, surface after the destroyer passed, and continue their hunt. The British hunt us with fireworks. Loud, impressive, ultimately harmless. We are the wolves. They are sheep with firecrackers, Kretschmer wrote in his war diary. The American problem. January 1942. Anti-Submarine Warfare Operations Research Group, Washington, D.C. Dr. Patrick Blackett, the British physicist on loan to the Americans, presented findings that should have terrified the Allied Naval Command. Gentlemen, we are losing. Not slowly, not gradually, but catastrophically. At current sinking rates, Britain will be starved into submission by mid-1933. Our anti-submarine weapons are fundamentally ineffective. The numbers told a grim story. In the first 6 months of 1942, U-boats operating off the American East Coast, so close to shore that citizens could see ships burning from the beach, had sunk 397 ships. American destroyers and Coast Guard cutters had sunk exactly 3 U-boats in return. A 132-to-1 kill ratio in favor of the Germans. The problem wasn't courage or effort. American sailors fought with desperate determination. The problem was technology. Conventional depth charges required 3 things to be effective: knowing exactly where the submarine was, predicting where it would be 30 seconds later, setting the charges to explode at the correct depth. Get any one of these wrong, and the submarine escaped. Get all 3 right, and you still had only about a 10% chance of a kill, because the blast radius of a depth charge was relatively small. A submarine 50 feet from the explosion might be shaken, but survive. Commander James Knowles, commanding the destroyer USS Benson, described the frustration in his after-action report from March 1942. Established solid sonar contact at 800 yards, closed to attack, lost contact at 100 yards as required by sonar geometry, dropped 12 depth charges in a diamond pattern, contact re-established 400 yards away, submarine evading at high speed, 0 damage inflicted, submarine escaped. This describes my last 6 attacks. We are fighting blind. The British innovation. December 1940. HMS Westcott, North Atlantic. Lieutenant Commander William Hedgehog watched as his ship's depth charge attack failed for the 15th time. The U-boat they'd been hunting had escaped, and Hedgehog, despite his name's coincidence with future history, could only watch in frustration. At the Admiralty's Department of Miscellaneous Weapons Development, a deliberately boring name for a secret weapons lab, a team of engineers was working on a radical idea. What if you could attack a submarine without passing over it? The concept seems simple, but the engineering was nightmarish. Instead of dropping charges that detonated at preset depths, fire projectiles ahead of the attacking ship. Use contact fuses so they only exploded if they actually hit the submarine. Keep sonar contact throughout the entire attack. The weapon they developed looked bizarre. 24 spigot mortars arranged in a pattern resembling a hedgehog, each firing a 65-pound projectile containing 35 pounds of Torpex, an explosive 50% more powerful than TNT. The mortars fired simultaneously, throwing their projectiles 250 yards ahead of the ship in an elliptical pattern covering an area 120 feet by 140 feet. The genius was in what it didn't do.
It didn't explode unless it hit something. Conventional depth charges detonated whether they hit anything or not, creating massive underwater explosions that disrupted sonar and gave the submarine cover to escape. Hedgehog projectiles that missed simply sank to the bottom. Only a direct hit produced an explosion. This meant something revolutionary. If you heard an explosion, you knew you'd hit the submarine. If you heard nothing, you maintained perfect sonar contact and could attack again immediately. The first Hedgehog system was installed on HMS Westcott in January 1942. Initial results were disappointing. The weapon required precise ship handling, careful calculation, and tactics that contradicted everything destroyer captains had learned about anti-submarine warfare. But then came May 1942 and HMS Van Sittart's encounter with U-302. The first kill. May 20, 1942, Western approaches, Atlantic Ocean. Commander Nicholas Koopman, aboard HMS Van Sittart, had stalked U-302 for 6 hours. The German submarine, commanded by Corvetan Captain Herbert Schulze, was a veteran boat with 11 confirmed kills. Schulze knew the British were above him. He'd survived 14 depth charge attacks. He was 280 feet deep, moving at 3 knots, conserving battery power. The destroyer would eventually lose contact or run out of depth charges. They always did. Then he heard a sound no U-boat commander had heard before. Not the splash of depth charges, but multiple small splashes, almost musical. His hydrophone operator looked confused. Herr Kalu, sounds like stones being thrown into water. The first Hedgehog projectile struck U-302's pressure hull at a 35-degree angle, penetrating the steel plating before its contact fuse detonated 35 pounds of Torpex inside the submarine's forward torpedo room. The explosion that followed was catastrophic. The torpedo room flooded instantly. 6 men died in the first second. The watertight door, damaged by the blast, failed to seal properly. Water began flooding into the control room. "Blow all tanks! Emergency surface!" As U-302 struggled upward, her hull damaged and flooding, 2 more Hedgehog projectiles struck her conning tower. The submarine surfaced briefly, her crew abandoning ship before she slipped beneath the waves for the final time. Schulze survived, picked up by Van Sittart. During interrogation, he made a statement that would be repeated throughout U-boat headquarters within days. "They can hit us. They hit us 3 times. We never saw it coming. This changes everything." The news reached Admiral Donitz on May 22nd. His response, recorded in the Kriegsmarine War Diary, was dismissive. "British propaganda. Submarine commanders must maintain nerves. Depth charges remain ineffective. Continue operations as planned." This was the first of many fatal miscalculations. The American acceleration. July 1942, Bath Iron Works, Maine. Commander William McAllister stood on the deck of USS England, a destroyer under construction that would become one of the most lethal submarine hunters in history. "How many?" he asked the ordnance officer. "We're installing 2 Hedgehog systems, sir. Forward mount has 24 spigots, after mount has 24 more. You'll be able to throw 48 projectiles per attack run." McAllister studied the weapon specifications. The engineering was elegant. Unlike depth charges that required the ship to pass over the target, Hedgehog allowed attacks while maintaining sonar contact. The contact fuses meant no false positives. Every explosion was a hit. But the real advantage was tactical. A destroyer armed with Hedgehog could attack repeatedly in quick succession. Miss with the first pattern, realign, and fire again 30 seconds later. With depth charges, each attack run took 3 to 5 minutes because the massive explosions disrupted sonar contact. American production capacity transformed British innovation into operational dominance. By October 1942, 45 American destroyers were equipped with Hedgehog. By January 1943, 89 ships carried the weapon. By June 1943, over 200 vessels carried the weapon. The training program revolutionized anti-submarine doctrine. At the Anti-Submarine Warfare School in Miami, destroyer crews practiced against simulated targets until Hedgehog attacks became automatic. Exact geometry was calculated using mechanical computers that solved the complex trigonometry in seconds. Most importantly, American factories began producing Hedgehog projectiles by the hundreds of thousands. Each projectile cost approximately $85 to manufacture, expensive individually, but cheaper than losing merchant ships worth millions. The tide turns. March 1943. Atlantic Ocean. Multiple locations. The month that would later be called the crisis of the Battle of the Atlantic saw the highest U-boat sinkings of the war. 108 Allied merchant ships, totaling 693,000 tons. But something else happened in March 1943 that German intelligence missed. 20 U-boats were destroyed. 14 of those kills were attributed to Hedgehog-equipped vessels. The mathematics had shifted. For the first time since the war began, U-boat losses exceeded production. Dönitz was building 10 boats per month. The Allies were sinking 11. Kapitänleutnant Peter Kramer, commanding U-333, survived a Hedgehog attack on March 17th and recorded the experience in his memoir, U-Boat Commander. The splashes were almost gentle. No massive underwater pressure waves like depth charges, just small splashes as if someone was skipping stones. Then silence. I thought perhaps a new acoustic weapon to confuse our hydrophones. Then 3 explosions, direct hits on the stern. The rudder jammed. We couldn't dive, we couldn't maneuver. We were finished. Only luck saved us. The British destroyer was called away to escort a crippled merchant ship. We limped back to Lorient at 4 knots, half the crew injured, the boat a wreck. When I reported to headquarters, they didn't believe me. Depth charges can't hit directly, the intelligence officer said. I showed him the damage, 3 precise holes in the pressure hull. He went pale. The Wolfpack Massacre. May 1943. Convoy ONS-5, North Atlantic. Admiral Dönitz committed 41 U-boats, the largest Wolfpack ever assembled, to destroy this convoy of 43 merchant ships. He expected a massacre. He got one, but not the one he planned. The convoy's escorts included HMS Duncan and HMS Vedette, both equipped with Hedgehog. Over 5 days of savage battle, the U-boats sank 13 merchant ships, but the escorts sank 6 U-boats, 3 of them to Hedgehog attacks. The kill ratio had reversed. For the first time in the war, escorts were destroying U-boats faster than U-boats were destroying merchants. Oberleutnant Sorsay Harald Jeppener Haltenhoff, commanding U-628, was one of the 6 boats lost. His final radio transmission to U-boat headquarters was chilling. Under attack by new weapon, multiple direct hits, boat flooding, cannot dive, cannot... The transmission ended. His body was never recovered, nor were those of his 47 crew members. The mathematical certainty. June 1943. U-boat headquarters, Berlin. Admiral Dönitz sat before casualty reports that made his hands shake. In May 1943 alone, 41 U-boats had been destroyed. 41 boats with approximately 2,000 crew members simply gone. His staff presented the statistics. January 1943, 6 U-boats lost, 37 merchant ships sunk. February 1943, 19 U-boats lost, 63 merchant ships sunk. March 1943, 20 U-boats lost, 108 merchant ships sunk. April 1943, 16 U-boats lost, 56 merchant ships sunk. May 1943, 41 U-boats lost, 50 merchant ships sunk. The progression was inexorable. As more Allied escorts received Hedgehog, U-boat losses skyrocketed, while their effectiveness plummeted. "We must withdraw from the North Atlantic, temporarily, until we develop countermeasures," his operations officer urged. Dönitz made the announcement on May 24, 1943. After 4 years of near-continuous operations, the wolf packs would withdraw from the North Atlantic. Officially, it was temporary repositioning. In reality, it was an admission of defeat. The withdrawal order reached U-boats at sea through encrypted radio. Kapitänleutnant Jürgen Osten, commanding U-861, recorded his reaction. "We are ordered to withdraw. We, who terrorized the Atlantic, ordered to run. The Kalau gathered us in the control room and told us the truth. The Americans have made the Atlantic impassable. The weapons have changed. The war has changed. We have lost." The technology gap. August 1943. Captured U-boat examination facility, Boston Navy Yard. American engineers studying U-505, captured intact in June 1944, discovered how far behind German submarine technology had fallen. U-505's hull showed damage from 3 separate Hedgehog attacks she'd survived. The impact points revealed something disturbing. German submarines had no effective defense against contact-fused forward-throwing weapons. The pressure hulls, designed to withstand the crushing pressure of deep dives and the shock waves of near-miss depth charges, shattered like china when hit directly by Hedgehog projectiles. The 35 pounds of Torpex, detonating in direct contact with the hull, created focused destruction that depth charges couldn't match. German engineers had anticipated underwater pressure waves. They hadn't anticipated precision strikes. Commander Edward Coley, chief of the examination team, wrote in his report, "The U-boat is over-engineered for the wrong threat. Its heavy construction protects against near misses, but makes it more vulnerable to direct hits. The weight of reinforcement actually works against survival because it prevents the rapid maneuvers necessary to evade Hedgehog patterns." The human cost. September 1943. U-boat training school, Pillau, Germany. Kapitänleutnant Reinhard Teddy Suren, one of Germany's top aces with 18 ships sunk, taught the new class of U-boat commanders. What he had to tell them was far different from the confident doctrine of 1939. "You will not survive," he told them bluntly. "The average operational life of a U-boat is 4 patrols. The average U-boat commander lasts 6 months. These are not pessimistic estimates. These are statistics. The Americans have weapons we cannot defeat. They will know where you are before you know where they are. They will hit you before you can dive. They will kill you before you understand what's happening. Your job is not to survive. Your job is to sink as many of their ships as you can before they sink you." The young officers, most in their early 20s, some teenagers, sat in shocked silence. This wasn't the glorious submarine warfare they had envisioned. In October 1943, U-boat headquarters began mandatory psychological evaluations for all crew members. The results were classified, but devastating. Over 40% of submarine crews showed symptoms of what would later be called post-traumatic stress disorder. Men refused to dive. Experienced ratings requested transfer to surface ships. Suicide rates climbed. The German response was predictable. Intensified indoctrination, speeches about duty and sacrifice, threats against deserters. None of it addressed the fundamental problem. German submariners were being sent to die in boats that could no longer protect them, hunted by weapons they couldn't evade. The U.S.-England legend. May 1944. Philippine Sea. Destroyer escort U.S. England would write the most remarkable chapter in anti-submarine warfare history. 6 Japanese submarines sunk in 12 days, all using Hedgehog. Commander Walton Pendleton commanded England with tactics perfected over 2 years of North Atlantic convoy duty. His crew could calculate attack geometry, acquire sonar contact, and fire a Hedgehog pattern in under 3 minutes. The first kill came May 19th, Japanese submarine I-16, sunk after 2 Hedgehog attacks. May 22nd, RO-106, 1 attack, immediate kill. May 23rd, RO-104, 2 attacks, kill. May 24th, RO-116, 3 attacks, kill. May 26th, RO-108, 2 attacks, kill. May 31st, RO-105, 1 attack, kill. 6 submarines in 12 days. The Japanese submarine force in the Philippines was effectively eliminated by a single destroyer escort. Admiral William Bull Halsey sent England a message: "There'll always be an England in the United States Navy." The Japanese Navy studied England's tactics and concluded, "American anti-submarine weapons have achieved perfection. Submarine operations against American forces are no longer tactically viable."
The German desperation, December 1944, U-boat Command, Berlin. The statistics had become genocidal. In 1944, 249 U-boats were destroyed. Production could no longer replace losses. More horrifying, 12,000 U-boat crew members died, nearly twice the number killed in the previous 3 years combined. Admiral Dönitz, promoted to Commander-in-Chief of the Kriegsmarine, faced impossible mathematics. At current loss rates, the entire U-boat force would be extinct within 6 months. German engineers developed countermeasures, snorkel systems allowing submerged diesel operation, acoustic torpedoes, rubber coating to defeat sonar. None addressed the fundamental problem. Hedgehog attacks were contact-based. You couldn't jam them, you couldn't decoy them, you could only avoid being hit, and against a weapon that covered a 17,000 square foot pattern with deadly accuracy, avoidance was becoming impossible. Kapitänleutnant Erich Toep, one of the few surviving aces, wrote in his classified report to U-boat headquarters, "We are losing because our doctrine is obsolete. We hunt targets we can no longer reach. We dive to depths that no longer protect us. We fight a 1939 war with 1939 tactics against 1944 weapons. Unless we fundamentally change how we operate, we are sending men to die for no tactical gain." His report was classified and ignored. The final accounting. May 8, 1945. Germany's surrender. The Battle of the Atlantic's final statistics told a story of complete reversal. Total U-boats built, 1,162. Total U-boats destroyed, 783, 67.4% casualty rate. U-boat crew members killed, approximately 28,000 of 40,000, 70% casualty rate. All Allied merchant ships sunk by U-boats, 2,779 ships, 14.1 million tons. U-boats sunk by Hedgehog-equipped vessels, 271 confirmed, 47 probable. The weapon that German commanders had mocked as British desperation had killed more U-boats than any other anti-submarine weapon. More than aircraft, more than mines, more than conventional depth charges. The mathematics of the kill ratio told the complete story. Depth charges, approximately 5% success rate per attack. Hedgehog, approximately 22% success rate per attack. Later Hedgehog Mark 11, approximately 40% success rate per attack. A fourfold improvement in lethality, multiplied by the ability to attack repeatedly without losing sonar contact, created a weapon system that transformed submarine warfare from a contest between equals into systematic extermination. The post-war revelation.
September 1945, Interrogation Center, London. Admiral Karl Dönitz, now a prisoner of war, sat across from Commander Peter Gretton, one of Britain's most successful escort commanders. "When did you know you'd lost?" Gretton asked. Dönitz were silent for a long moment. "May 1943, when we lost 41 boats in 1 month. But we'd actually lost earlier. We just didn't know it. The moment your Hedgehog weapons became operational in numbers, the Battle of the Atlantic was over. We simply hadn't admitted it yet." "Why didn't you adapt, develop countermeasures?" "How do you adapt to a weapon that only explodes when it hits you? Our submarines were designed to survive near misses. Your weapon eliminated near misses. Every attack was either a miss or a kill. There is no defense against precision." In separate interrogations, surviving U-boat commanders provided remarkable consistency in their assessments. Kapitänleutnant Peter Kremer. "Hedgehog was the death sentence. You couldn't hear it coming, you couldn't evade it. You could only hope they missed." Korvetkapitan Reinhard Suren. "In 1939, a skilled commander could survive depth charge attacks through maneuver and nerve. By 1943, survival was pure probability. By 1944, survival was luck. By 1945, survival was miracle." Kapitänleutnant Herbert Werner, one of the youngest surviving commanders. "We were fighting 20th century weapons with 19th century tactics. The British and Americans industrialized submarine hunting. They made it mechanical, automatic, deadly efficient. We responded with courage and determination. Those are admirable qualities. They're also irrelevant against mathematics." The technological legacy. The Hedgehog's influence extended far beyond World War II. The principles it established, forward-throwing weapons, contact detonation, maintained sonar contact during attack, became fundamental to all future anti-submarine warfare. Modern anti-submarine rockets, torpedoes, and missiles all descend directly from the Hedgehog concept. The U.S. Navy's ASROC, anti-submarine rocket, developed in the 1950s, was essentially a Hedgehog that could launch a homing torpedo 5 miles instead of 250 yards. Soviet submarine designers studying captured Hedgehog systems developed defensive doctrines based on the assumption that any surface contact would result in forward-thrown weapons. This assumption shaped submarine design for 50 years. The human dimension. Behind every statistic was human tragedy. 28,000 German submariners died. Young men, average age 24, who believed in their mission, their boats, and their commanders. They were sent to die in a battle that was already lost, killed by weapons their leadership refused to acknowledge or couldn't counter. On the Allied side, approximately 36,000 merchant seamen died, along with 5,000 naval personnel on escort vessels. These men faced torpedoes, freezing Atlantic waters, fire, and drowning. For 3 years, they fought with weapons that barely worked. When Hedgehog finally gave them an effective tool, they used it with devastating efficiency. USS England's crew, after sinking 6 submarines in 12 days, showed no triumph. Commander Pendleton wrote, "We performed our duty. We sent 6 submarines to the bottom, approximately 420 Japanese sailors. They were the enemy. They would have killed us without hesitation. But there is no joy in perfecting the machinery of death, even righteous death. We became very good at killing. That skill will haunt us forever." The final lesson. March 1946, U.S. Naval War College, Newport, Rhode Island. Admiral Jonas Ingram, Commander-in-Chief of the Atlantic Fleet, delivered a lecture on the Battle of the Atlantic to a class of post-war officers. "Gentlemen, you will read about brave destroyers dueling U-boats, about cat-and-mouse games in the depths, about heroic last stands and desperate battles. All of that happened. None of it mattered as much as a simple 65-pound projectile thrown 250 yards. The Hedgehog didn't just sink U-boats, It fundamentally altered the mathematics of submarine warfare. It turned anti-submarine operations from an art into a science, from a contest of skill into an application of probability. When U-boat commanders mocked American destroyers, they were mocking the visible weapon, the ship, the crew, the tactics. They never saw the real weapon. Industrial democracy creating technological superiority, creating systematic domination. We didn't defeat U-boats through courage, though our sailors showed plenty. We defeated them through engineering. We created a weapon that turned submarine warfare from a balanced contest into slaughter. The Germans discovered this too late to matter. Remember this lesson. In modern warfare, the side that innovates faster, produces better, and adapts quicker will destroy the side that relies on past glory, traditional tactics, and courage alone. The U-boat force learned this lesson. They paid for it with 28,000 lives. Epilogue: The Last U-Boat. May 14, 1945, 6 days after Germany's surrender, U-977, commanded by Oberleutnant Sir Heinz Schaefer, was still at sea, having not received the surrender order. The submarine surfaced off the coast of Norway, and Schaefer saw, painted on a nearby British destroyer, Hedgehog mounting, guns ready. The British captain signaled, "The war is over. Surface and surrender, or we will sink you." Schaefer wrote in his memoir, "I surfaced. What choice did I have? We were the last. The entire U-boat force destroyed. 300,000 tons of Allied shipping rests on the bottom. 28,000 German sailors rest beside them. For what? That British destroyer could have killed us in seconds with their Hedgehog. We couldn't dive fast enough. We couldn't run. We couldn't fight. We could only surrender and live, or resist and die pointlessly. That British destroyer could have killed us in seconds with their Hedgehog. We couldn't dive fast enough. We couldn't run. We couldn't fight. We could only surrender and live, or resist and die pointlessly. The Battle of the Atlantic ended not with a glorious last stand, but with a simple choice: life or death. We chose life. The U-boat force, which once terrorized the Atlantic, ended with 42 men climbing out of a submarine with their hands raised, facing a weapon we'd mocked as British foolishness. The Atlantic became our graveyard. The Hedgehog became our gravedigger. We never understood until it was far too late. The final U-boat casualty of the Atlantic War was recorded 3 weeks later when U-505, captured intact in 1944 and was being studied by American engineers, accidentally flooded during testing. No lives were lost. The submarine was recovered, repaired, and eventually became a museum exhibit in Chicago. Visitors who walk through U-505 today see the Hedgehog impact holes patched but still visible in her hull. Small holes, barely 12 inches in diameter. Precise. Deadly. Revolutionary. German U-boat commanders mocked American destroyers. The Hedgehog had the last laugh. It always did.